If you've ever wanted to know what it takes to build a website like Costa Coffee, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to give you a step-by-step tutorial on how just to do that. We're going to make use of NextJS 12 and style component along with material UI icons. This video is perfect for beginners to see how the coding process works, as well as developers and companies who want to learn more about the latest modern JavaScript framework NextJS 12. By the end of this process, you'll be able to fetch data server side and have it readily available on the client side, add a map and point out location data that you will receive from building your own API, style your components with JavaScript using styled components, and filter out data from certain categories with the select drop-down, along with many more cool techniques. Anyways, I hope you enjoy the build. Let's get started. Right, so I've got my Visual Studio Code open and my website that I'm going to copy. I'm just going to open up my terminal, get a new terminal, and we're going to create a new folder. So currently I need to go into my desktop, like so. And the command that I'm going to use to install, I've actually got it from a repo created by the guys from Versal. It's an example app with styled components. There's a lot of benefits to this. It will set up a global theme for me, which is already integrated in my app component, along with the Babel plugins for style components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the first section of this line here, npx create next app as opposed to create React app, with the example of the styled components integrated. Whilst that's loading, what it will do is it will prompt me to give my project a name, which is what this second section is for here, but I prefer to import it in here. So I'm going to name this my Costa clone YouTube, like so. Press enter. So now what that's going to do is going to install all my dependencies for me. Everything I need is going to have my pages folder propagate, my node modules installed. Okay, so now I have my project set up. I'm going to cd into my folder, so cd Costa clone -YouTube, like so, and I'm going to run the app in my local host on my Chrome website. So npm run dev, which will open up my app on localhost 3000, like so. So if I just go into my browser and search for that, so I now have my app loaded on the right and I have my folder structure on the left. I have a section or folder called pages, which has an app.js, document.js, and index.js. The index.js file would contain my home page route. So if I change my page to say Costa clone and saved, it would update automatically to Costa clone. Also in my folder structure, I have a app.js file which creates my global styles, and it also wrapped a theme provider around my app also. So what I want to do with my theme is I want to have it in its own file. So if I cut this out and at my package.json level, I'm going to create a new file and name that theme.js, like so, and paste in my theme. We also need to export this theme. So if I export const theme, I want to restructure my theme object also. So what I want to do is I want to remove the colors for one. So at the moment I have a primary color of this hex code here. What we need to do is we need to define the new primary color. So if I go onto the website of Costa, I do have a Chrome extension which I can select the color that I need. So in this case, the primary color would be the maroony red from the Costa website. So if I copy that and replace that in here like so, and then go back onto my website. So now I have exported the theme out, and if I save, I now get an error saying theme is not defined. So if I go back into my app.js and I import my theme from the theme file like so and save, I now need to go into my index file, and because I restructured the object of the theme and I removed colors, primary would be directly accessible inside. So I changed that to theme.primary, and if I save everything now, so now my app should have the red primary theme. Now that we've built the theme file, what I also want to do is create a components folder where I will build all my components and then import them into the relevant pages that need them. So if I go again onto my package.json level and create a new folder and name that components, and now we are ready to build the first component, which will be the header. So if I show you, we have the logo on the left, we have a menu links section in the middle, and then we also have some icons which we'll import on the right. So in the next section, we're going to build the header. Okay, so we're going to build the header component. First off, I'm going to go into my components folder and create a new folder within there and name that header like so. And I'm going to create two files. One is index.js, which has my code inside, and I'm also going to create a styles.js folder, which is where I can put all my styles also. So back in the index.js, I'm going to use my React functional snippets. So if I type in RFCE, it basically builds out a functional component for me. So press tab on that. And this one is going to be called header, like so. And within here, I'm going to render out a H1 that says header, like so. So back into my index.js file, if I import the header, so if I remove my title and import a component named header and close off the header, if I now save, I should have my header component on my index page. Just a quick side note for the command I used, I have the React functional snippets. It's the ES7 React Redux functional snippets here. So going back to my header, I need to have the left section, the middle section, and the right section. So I'm going to create divs for them. But first off, I'm going to create a container. So this is where style components comes into play. Because I've defined a container, I now need to go into my styles and import styled from styled components. Then I want to create a div named container. So if I export const container, which is equal to styled dot div, and then we now put backticks in place where all the CSS would go. For example, if I did a background color of blue and saved, and also imported the container from my styles file. So import container, so from the styles like so. So now I should, if I click save and go back, I should have a blue border with header just above. So now I'm going to build out 3 divs within my container. So I'm going to delete the header, and within here I'm going to have a logo container first off, which has the logo inside. I'm going to have a menu links container also. Container. And I am going to have a icons container right at the end. Icons container. Now I need to import these from my styles file. So first of all, I'm going to copy them, add them in here. And now I need to go over to my styles file. Same as I've done here, export them like so. So I don't want the background colors blue on these containers, so I'm going to delete them. So I'll just copy these, paste. So everything I put in this style will only apply to the header. So I might have a logo container elsewhere. It's similar to CSS modules where everything is styled for the component. Instead of putting div in the main container, this could also be known as the nav, because everything after the styled is a HTML element. This will also help with the SEO of the website. So now that I've got the logo container, I'm going to import the next image component. So if I go on to the next image docs, so on here, all I need to do is import the image component. So if I type in image like so, I have a auto suggestion of the next image. So if I click on that, I do require the source. So the required props are the source, width, and height. So if I put in the source, which is going to be a string that I have copied. So if I go onto the website, copy the image address like so, and paste it within there. So I've got the logo now. I also need the width. So these will be in pixel values, the width and the height. So I'm going to do the width and height as 150 pixels each. And then I need to also close off the component, the image component like so. So now I have the logo container. I'm now going to import the menu links on here. So what I'm going to do is I've got them already copied out. So I'm going to just paste them in here. And I need the our menu as an A tag. So if I save that now and go back to my component, I now get an error message which says the host name is not configured. So I need to now create a next.config.js file. The reason this error is because NextJS is quite selective in terms of it wouldn't let any image apply on their websites. So we need to specify and define what images are configured. So if I go into the next docs and copy this across, so if I go into next.js, it does give me a next config.js file where I could copy everything across. But in my case, I'm going to create a new next config.js file. So next.config.js, like so. Within there, I'm going to define images. So I need to do a module dot export, which is equal to an object, and within the object I'm going to have images, which within the images I'm going to have some domains which contains an array of strings of different websites. But in this case, if I go onto my error, the host name would be this little URL here. So if I input this, and now if I save all, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to have to restart my server, and now my images should be allowed onto the web page. Another cool thing about Next Images is it delivers a WebP version. So if I search WebP, image component and optimization. So Next will automatically determine the width and height based on your imported file. So some of the optimizations built into the image component include improved performance, visual stability, faster page downloads, and asset flexibility, which is why we need to define the pre-routes within the next config file, because then it could go to work and implement these features along with other features. Okay, so if I refresh, I should now have the Costa logo on there. Okay, so now I have an error. If I just go back into my next config, and the error is here, so I should have a module.export, and now I save, restart the server again, and now it should all work correctly and the image should load. So if I refresh my page, so I have my image here, and I also have the menu items. I also need to implement the icons. So if I go back into my index, in my icons container, I'm just going to put a p tag of icons for now, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to find icons and import them using Material UI. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to import two icons similar to these. So what I need to do is I need to import Material UI into my project. So if I create a new terminal, and on Material UI, if I click on the top here where it says getting started and installation, I basically need to import this package here. So if I copy that and paste that in and press enter. So whilst that's installing, now going to go down to or search for icons, and when I go into my icons page, I also need to install the icons package within Material UI. So I now need to install the icons also, and whilst that's installing, I'm going to go into the list of icons that they have, and I can search for the icons within here. I already have found the icons that I need, so I'm just going to copy them across from my project, paste them in, and all I do is the way you import the icons is like any other component, and do the same for the person outlined icon. And now if I save, it should import within my header component. So now we move on to the styling of the component. So if I open up my styles, so now we move on to the container. I want the background color to be transparent. I want the color of all the elements within the header to be white. So I'm going to access this from my theme colors. If I type the S for $ and curly braces, within here I now have access to my props. So if I type props and return the props given to me, which is the theme file, that is because it's wrapped around my app dot white. So now the color will be white, although I need to define that in my theme file as well. So just under primary, if I type in white and give it the white hex code, so all the children elements should turn white. Also the background is now white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the background color the same as the primary colors. For now, I'm going to do this as primary and save. And now we have all the elements in the header. Now what we need to do is we need to make them so that they're not in a column but in a row. So the way we do that is we use display flex. We want to align the items centrally. So this will align the items horizontally. Now they are in a row. So now in my logo container, what I want to do is I want to reduce the image size. So what I am going to give the container a width of 80 pixels. So that will reduce the image size. And then I also want to give it a margin left of 50 pixels, so that it's not touching this left line here on the web page. So if I save that, it's spaced it out a little further. So on the menu links container, I want to do the same again. So I want to give it a display of flex, align item center, and if I save, this should spread across. Now I want to give this middle container the whole width. So take as much space as you want on this horizontal axis. So what I'm going to do is give it a flex of 1, like so. So it will space everything out. And then I also want to justify content as space around, just so that they have space in between each element. What I also want to do is, because this image is stretched within the image component, I get a prop which I can contain the image. So the prop is object fit contain, so the image and the logo would look contained within its div. So now that looks much better. What I also want to do is style the right container now. So within the icons container, I want to give this a flex of 0.3, which is equivalent of 30% of the entire width. So if I save now you can see this whole section belongs to the icons container. Now I want my icons to go towards the end. Display of flex, align the items centrally, and I want to push these icons to the end here. So justify content, flex, end. Now save. That pushes them to the end. Now all I need to do is give a margin right of 20 pixels and save. So that now what I need to do is space the individual Material UI icons individually. So what I'm going to do is they have a class name which I will paste in. So MUI SVG icon root. So I'm going to give them a margin left of 15 pixels and define the size of them. So they are classed as font. So if I give them a font of 2 rem and save, we now have the icons complete and we have the header complete. What I also want to do is add some routing to this. So we'll discuss the next link tag in the next video. As opposed to React, where we would have to install React Router DOM and then define the routes in our app level, the way Next.js does it is via pages. So the index page is the home route. If I was to create another page /blog, so if I created a blog.js page, that would create a /blog on my page. But for now, we would get a 404 error like so. And we'll look at 404 errors in the next video. So what I want to do is I want to route my header. So the links that I want to create. So if I go back onto my home page, so the links that I want to create is when I click on this logo here, I want it to go to the home route. I want to create a menu route, so /menu. And the other page that we're building is the location. So if I go into the Next.js docs and search link, we get the next link over here. So all I need to do for a very basic link is I need to import the link. So if I copy this and go into my header file, I want to import the link, and then all I need to do is give it a href. So copy. So within my logo container, the image would have a link href of the slash. So when I click on the logo, I want it to go to the home directory like so. And then if I just copy this again, so the our menu I would want to go to the /menu page. And then if I close it off again, and then I also want to have the location routed to /location. And I also want to close this link off as well. So now I have successfully imported the link route within my header. Now what I need to do is create the corresponding pages for these routes. So I already have the / route already pre-built. Now I want to create the /location. So if I create a new file in my pages folder and name that location.js, again RFCE, to create the functional component, and I want to give my function name and default export as a capital L for location. And in this div, I'm going to render out a h1 saying location page, and going to do the same for the menu page. So new file, menu.js, rfce tab, capital M for menu, and then I'm going to render a h1 saying menu page. And if I save all now, I now have created the location page, which if I click on here, I've got onto the location page. If I go back and click on our menu, now I have the our menu page. Just a few tweaks with my header file. I need to make sure the A tags are in line with the other tags or the P tags on the page. So what I need to do is go into my header component in the style. So on the container element, any A tag within there, it has to have a color of white. So if I just copy the color of white here, paste that in and save, it's turned white. And I also want it to have a text decoration of none, so that will remove the underline. And for every element on the header, I want to have a pointy icon cursor on there so that when I hover over, I know it's a clickable element. So if I now save, I can now see the cursor pointing and my routing is now working as well. In the next video, I'm going to import the fonts that Costa have on their website into our build also. In this video, I'm going to import some custom fonts that I have on my local machine that I have downloaded. But the way I define the fonts is I went onto the Costa website. I have a Chrome extension called What Font, which you can download from the web store. If I click on the font, if I click on the icon there, I can just hover over the headings and I can see here that the main headings are Brandon Grotesque Bold, and also for the body tags, so the P tags, we have a font of Gotham Book. I have pre-downloaded these fonts and got them on my local machine. I will also make them available in the description. But what I will do is on my package.json level, I'm going to create a new folder called public. Within this folder, I'm going to import my fonts and also import my images. So if I just drag them into my public folder, like so. So now I have my fonts, I have the Brandon Grotesque and the Gotham Book Regular, and then I also have images which I will use for the rest of this project. Now what I need to do is to change the fonts. I am first off going to create again a new file in the package.json level. So if I click new file, and I'm going to name this global.css. And in here, I'm going to define two font faces. The first font face, I will just copy across and explain. So I have two font faces in here. So the source URL is where I'm going to pull my fonts from. So if I go into my public folder, so in the current directory, and I have found public, like so, go into the font folder, and then as you can see, Gotham Book is there. So I'll select that, name it the font family of Gotham Book. So I will define that one. And then if I do the same thing for Brandon Grotesque, and I don't have the bold font on here, so if I select the regular, like so, give it the font family of Brandon Grotesque. And now that I've defined my font faces, I now need to add them into my HTML element. So I have already predefined this. So for the HTML and body, I am going to have a zero padding and zero margin, and all the body elements are going to have the font family of Gotham Book. All my headings are going to have the font family of Brandon Grotesque. What I also want to do with the Brandon Grotesque is, because I don't have the bold font, I will give it a font weight of bold. So now all my headings should be in bold. There is one more step, which is on my app.js file. I don't need the global style anymore. So what I will do is I'll just delete that and the global style also, and delete the import within my app.js file. So now if I save everything and then I import my styles from my global CSS, so up a directory, and then if I find the global CSS and now I save, my fonts should change and the margin and padding should also have changed as well. So now we have successfully imported the images and also the custom fonts that are on our local machine. If we wanted to do it via Google Fonts, there are ways to do that. So if we go on to font optimization, you can essentially import these link style tags within the next head component. So if you read through this document, it would tell you how to implement via the head as opposed to if you didn't have the local fonts in place. Okay, so now that we have our header complete, we also have the font imported and all the media imported. It is time to build the home banner on the index page, so the home page. I am now on the home page. I don't need this title anymore, so I will delete that, and I don't need tiled components anymore, so I will delete that. I am going to create some styles on this page. So within my pages folder, I am going to create a new folder called index. And within the index folder, I'm going to add a styled file. like so. So as with all style files, I'm going to import styles from styled components, and what I want to create is a main banner container. So that's where this main banner will live. So main banner container, which is equal to styled dot main. So again, a HTML element on the home page. This will be the main banner on the page, so the main item. So now within the main banner container, I'm going to import this just under the header like so as a component. So I need to import it from styles, and then with the squiggly red lines, I need to give the components a parent. So if I give it an empty React fragment like so and push them up, and if I save now and go back to my local host, I need to open some curly braces for my return and push this within there. I also need the main banner container as acting like a div, so main banner container with the closing tag. So within the main banner container, I am going to import again the next image component like so, with the source equal to the main banner. So if I go into my public folder and into images, I should have a hero banner.jpg there. So if I name this hero banner and then give this a width of 2000, just so it's across the whole page, and the height of 1000. Again, these are in pixel values, so I need to import the hero banner. So import hero banner from my public folder, the public slash images slash hero banner .jpg, and now if I save, that should import. We have an error here, so I just close that off and save. So now I've imported the hero banner. So what I need to do also is make the banner appear behind the header. So on this page, what I will do is I will style the main banner. So if I close everything off, I'm going to my styles, so main banner container, I'm going to give it a position of relative because I will be adding text inside the container. I'll give it a text align of center like so. The color of the text will be white, so select access my props, so return my props dot theme dot white. So I've got the color, and I also want the width to be 100 viewport width always. Add that in there and save. So now I need to add the text box within the main banner container. So I'm going to export the hero banner, hero content should I say, which is equal to styled dot div like so, and this is going to have a position of absolute to the relative parent. I'm going to give it a top of 40% and a left of 10%. So what that will do is it will bring it down from the top 40% and it will make the text from the left 10% away. So if I save that, and now if I go into my index, underneath the image, I want to import the hero content. So the hero content I have is a H1 and a H3. So if I copy that and paste it in and now save all. I also need to import hero content from my styled file. So if I just add that within here and save. So now I have the hero content here. I also need to give this container a max width. So if I give it a max width of 300 pixels, we now have the maximum width that this text can go to is 300 pixels. In the next video, we're going to make the header transparent, and we're going to do this by passing down a prop. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to conditionally style the header background on the index page only. So what I am going to do is go into my index file. So in here, what I'm going to do is pass a prop down. What I essentially want to happen is this to have a linear gradient background on there. So instead of having this primary color in my header component on my index page, I'm going to pass a prop down or name it linear. So what that does is it passes down an object called linear to the header component. So now what I need to do is in my header component, I have in all React applications, we have access to something called props. So what I want to see is within my header component, I want to console.log the props that I now receive from anywhere that is rendering the header component. So if I save it all, and now in my browser, I want to inspect and open up the console. So in the console, I'm now getting an object getting console logged out, which says linear. So we have defined linear in the index page. So I'm passing down linear, which means it is true. So for this particular page, I am passing down linear into the header. So in another page, for example, if I rendered out the header component in the menu page, so if I do that, and import that from there, and if I save, and now if I go into my menu page, I will have the menu page with an empty object. That is because I am not passing anything down in that one. Whereas if I go back into my home page and now get an object of linear, which is true. So now to conditionally style the header component, all I need to do is I could do props.linear like so, or a shorthand method of ES6 JavaScript is to destructure. So if I destructure the linear prop from there, what I now need to do is pass it into my styled component. So linear is equal to linear prop, or I could rename this to something else. So within my container, I want to make it have a gradient. So if I name this gradient, which is equal to linear, which I'm getting passed down as true. So if linear is equal to true, is strictly equal to true, so then the gradient will be true. Or a shorthand method is if we just take that out and call it linear, because it will always equal true. In my styles file now, what I want to do is with my background color, I want to make that transparent, and then the background itself, I want to access my props. So the props that I am getting passed down, with the props that I am getting passed down, if there is a gradient prop, so if props.gradient is equal to true, so if it is true, this is a ternary operator where a question mark would be true and these colons would be false. So if the props.gradient is true, I am now going to copy across what I have. So the linear gradient I want. So if the gradient is true, the styling for this background now will be a linear gradient to top to a 0.7 RGBA of black. Otherwise, we don't want the background at all. So I am just going to say none, like so. So if I save now, what will happen is my background will go transparent like so. If I close this, so now my background is transparent. And if I go into my hour menu, it is again transparent. However, there's no linear gradient involved now. So if I go back onto my home page, I can now see that there is a white background behind, but there is also a linear gradient in place. So what I need to do now is give this header a Z index to push the header forward. So give it a Z index of say 10, save. And I also need to give it a position of absolute so that it stays at the top. So now it has stayed at the top and this banner has gone forward. So all I need to do now is stretch it out. So give it a width of 100 viewport width like so. And now we have the banner going in behind. And we have also used conditional styling to ensure that the header will have a linear background on certain pages when we pass down the linear prop or any prop for that matter. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to build the next section of the homepage, which is this split banner component. Now there are two of them, so what I'm going to do is create a reusable component for this so that it will take in a image as a prop. It will also take a heading as a prop and some subtext as a prop. So let's begin. in my components folder, I'm going to create a new folder and name this one split banner. I want it to be in my components folder. So now the header is separate and the split banner is separate. I'm going to create an index.js file, rfce, name this one split banner, and I'm going to say h1 split banner just to see if I can see it on the rendering on the page. So all I need to do now is go into my index.js. After the main banner container, there is a little space. So I'm just going to put a line break in there as well. So put a line break in and then render out the split banner from the split banner component. Now if I save all, I should have it displaying on the page. So now if I go back into my split banner, again, I want to name this as the container. I want to create the styles file. So import styles from styled components. Now we want to export const container equals styles dot div, like so. Now if I add the content within my split banner, what it's going to have is a image. So I'm going to do a normal image. The reason why is if I copy this image address and paste it in, it is already a WebP format. Now this alt would be the cooler, like so. But what I essentially want to do is I want to pass these down from the homepage index.js file as props. So what I want to happen is I want to destructure props within my split banner because there's going to be two banners. So if I pass down the image as the first prop, I pass down the heading as the second prop and the subtext as the third prop. Now I can render out the two components and pass down different props. So the split banner would have the prop of image equal to a string, which I got from this URL. Delete this. It will also have a heading. So heading equal to a string again. So Cupid's cooler, copy that, paste it in and close. And then the subtext, which will also be a string, which is this, copy and paste like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to these double quotes like so, and then the same here, and close off the subheading. So now if I go back to my split banner now, I'm getting the image, I'm getting the heading and the subtext. So I am going to render out the image. So the source is equal to the image being passed down from the props. The heading, so I am going to render a h1 which has the heading inside as the prop. And I am also going to have a p tag which is going to render out the subtext. So now if I save everything and go back to my local file, I need to also import the container from my styles like so and save. So now I have the image getting rendered, which I am passing down from my home component, and I am also getting the heading and the text being rendered as well. So now it's just a case of styling this out. So what I will do, I will have two sections, a section for the image, so an image container, and within the image container, I'm going to put the image inside, and then I'm going to also render out a text container. I need to change this to a capital. And then what I'm going to do is render the heading and subtext within there. And then we also need to import these from the styles file, and also in the styles file create the div elements for them. Now I have created all the divs within there. So what I need to do now is in my container, give my container a display of recs, which would put them into the same row. Align the items centrally like so. I am also going to give a font size to all children within this container, so it will be 1.2 rem, and save. So that splits it out. I'm going to give it a line height of 24 pixels to space that out. I've got a background color already, and save. So now the container itself will have a background color, I want to give it a max width, as it is on the website, of 1200 pixels. It has a little bit of space on the top, so I'm going to give it a margin top to extend that space of 50 pixels. And if I save, now what I need to do is in my image container and my text container, give them both a width of 50%, like so. Do that across. So now that is split evenly. I also want to give the image a min height of 512 px. So it can't go any smaller than that height. And the image is stretching out of its container. I want to give it a position of relative. And now I can style the image. So I want to give the image a height of 100%, a width of 100%, an object fit of contain. So it's going to contain the image within the 100% width and height of the 50% container. So now what we need to do is, because the position of its container is relative, the position of the image within the container, it needs to be absolute. So it will only stay within that fixed 50%. So now if I save, the image now is exactly within the 50%. Now going on to the text container, I've got the width the same. I also need the same min height. If I copy that and place the min height as 512 pixels, I need to justify the content of the container also as center. Now for the text container, what I need to do is place this within the middle of this div. So I'm going to use display grid this time and place the items in the center. So if I save, now they are placed centrally. I also need to style the div within there. So what I need to do is go back to my split banner, add a div inside, and render these two within the div. So now they are wrapped together in one. Now to style the div, all I need to do is give it a padding and a max width, which I have already defined. So a padding of top and bottom of 0 and 30 pixels for the left and the right, and then a max width for this container of text of 500 pixels. So if I save now, that should all be squashed together. All I need to do now is, instead of object fit contain, I want to cover the entire parent element that it's contained within. So if I save now, the image will be now stretched to its max available width. And all I need to do is go back into my home page and do the exact same thing again. Control C and paste and save. So now I have two similar elements. All I need to do is change the title on the heading for this one, copy the image address. Again, it's in WebP format, so that's good for Next.js. I'll copy that. Description. So if I save everything now and go back to my local host, so now I have two reusable components. Now what I want to do is I want to display this one on the right and keep this one the same. So like we have done previously, we're going to do some conditional styling where we pass down props down to the styles. So what I need to do is go into my index file, pass down another prop. So I want to do it in the second one, name that reverse banner, like so. So now I have access to another prop in my props on split banner. If I just quickly console log the reverse banner to see what I get back, I'll save all, go into my console. So now I am getting back undefined first because I haven't passed it down to this render of the component, and then I am getting true on the second render. So all I need to do now is pass it down into my component. So I'm going to call this style reverse, which is equal to reverse banner, like so. And then when I go into my styles file in my container, if I give it a flex direction and access my props once again. So with my props, if props dot reverse is true, then I want to give the flex direction of row reverse. Otherwise, give it a flex direction of row. And if I now save all, it now splits. As you can see, we now have one conditionally styled to row because it is not true. Props.reverse is not true within this component, but within the second component of the split banner, it is true. So therefore, props.rowReverse, the styling gets added on for this one. In the next video, I'm going to add the footer, and then we're going to move on to the locations page after that. Okay, so finally what I'm going to do is finish off the home page. So we're going to add the little text at the bottom and then also complete this section of the footer. So all I'm going to do is first off add the text below the split banner components that we have already completed. So if I go into my index.js file on the home page, I'm just going to render a p tag, paste that in and save. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a styled component for this. So I'm just going to call it terms. Now, if I copy this and import it at the top, go into my styled file and then export const the terms, which is equal to styled.p. It's a p tag, this one. What I'm going to do is give it a padding all around of 30 pixels. I'm going to align the text to the left and save. So now I have the text at the bottom. All I need to do is give it a font style of italic, a font size of 0.6 rem, and a line height of 20 pixels. So now I have that section complete. I could give it a color of grey also, or a light grey color, and potentially increase the font to 0.8. So I think that should be okay. I'll give it a normal grey. Yep, that's perfect. And now we will create the footer component. So if I import it first of all and name that one footer, and now what we have to do is create a folder for the footer component and a file of index.js or fce and name this one footer. So I have already predefined the footer links. I have put everything into a container, and in each container they have a column with a p tag inside. So that's that complete, and I will create a new file for the styles.js, and in the styles file I'm just going to copy and paste what I have. So with the container this time, I've given it a styled of footer to ensure that the HTML is rendering a footer. The column container has a background of the red, display of grid, which repeats 5 times. So we have 5 different columns here, with the text having a color of white, and padding of top and bottom of 10 pixels, and in between left and right of 5. I've also done some media queries in there so that when it reaches the tablet size device, then what would happen is it would go down into a single column like so. So if I save that, and in my footer I also need to import the style. So if I import the container, the column container, and the column itself from the styles, and now I save, and I also need to import now the footer from my components. And now if I save and scroll down, and now have my footer here, which is also responsive and goes down to the single column like so. There is one thing I also need to do for my headings. This should be in a regular font and not an italic font. So if I go into my global CSS and update my font face, so if I go into here and then I just want the black font, and if I save, now that looks very similar to the font on the actual Costa website. That's the homepage now complete. So what we will move on to next is the location page. And in this page, we will render out the map, and we will also render out the cards. and start implementing our API as well. Okay, so to build our API, we need some data. So what I have done is I have collected some data for some local Costa stores in the area of London, and I will build out a new API on my local host, which I can then map through and render the content of my API onto this locations page. So if I go onto next.js website and go on to the API routes, it does give me an in-depth overview of what I do to implement the API. All I want to do is make GET requests for now. So what I will do is I will copy this handler function, and what that does is it will print out the name of John Doe on there. So we will test this out now. What we need to do is create a folder first of all. So within the pages folder, I'm going to create a new folder called API. So if I just close everything down and in my pages folder, create a new folder called API and paste. Now what I want this API to be known as is store.js. So I will create a new file and call it store.js. And in here, I will paste the function copied. Now, if I save this, I should be able to access the name of John Doe as an object on my API. So if I go on to my localhost /API/store, I now have access to this object, which gives me the key and value. So now what I want to do is I want to build out an array of objects within here that maps through all of the locations, and then I can map through that and print it out onto my page. So I have gone to the trouble of already doing this. So I will just copy my API across and paste it in my store.js file like so. So I have a list of 10 different locations on here. They have the name, address, an ID, a latitude and longitude. That's what we would need to get out the data and print it out for the map, the time, the delivery, and the click and collect. So now that I have this data, I am going to fetch the data from my server as opposed to my client side. So from the browser, have the data pre-fetched before I even enter the page and before the browser loads the page, and then I can map the data accordingly. This in turn will help with SEO, and it makes the user journey and user experience much better and faster. Okay, so now that I have my data set up, I'm just going to save everything. So this API of store should now update if I press the refresh button. I now have an array of objects with all my locations on there for my Costa stores. So what I need to do is render this out onto the page. So if I go into my location.js file now, I am going to use the server-side props to get my data on the server side. So get server-side props. So what will happen is it will server-side render my component from any page. So I will use get server-side props as stated. So if you export a function called get server-side props from a page, so in this case the location page, NextJS will pre-render this page on each request using the data returned by the server-side props. It basically means that it will only fetch the data on my location.js page. So if I just copy this async function across, and I will just add it just after my default export. So I now will have access to a context object over here. So what I want to do is I want to define and fetch my store result. So I will use the await fetch method. So if I declare my fetch as store result, which is equal to await fetch, and then I pass in my API. So if I copy this and paste that in like so, and then what I want to do is I want to chain a dot then onto here, and I will get a response object back. And what I want to do with the response is I want to parse it into a JSON format like so. So then once I have done that, I have my store results now. So in this props, as stated, will be passed to the page component as props. So like we've done previously, within my props, I just want to pass my store results like so. So because I have prefetched the data from the server side, my client side page now should have access to this store results object in here. So all I need to do is destructure the store results within there. And if I just console.log my store results, I should see an object within my console that I am getting the correct results through. So if I go to /location like so, and then I open my console, I have an array of 10 objects which have within each object an address, an ID, a latitude, longitude, the name, and times. Now all I need to do is render that out onto the page, and starting off with the map component, we will build a map and we will ensure this data is plotted onto our map. So we will do that in the next video. Okay, so in my locations page, I have now fetched the data and I've got it rendering within the console. So now what I want to do is I want to build out this left section here, which it shows each individual store card and the information that is contained within it. And we will also build out this search bar here so that when we type in the search result, it will filter based on the title. So what I'm going to first of all start off with is a container for the page. And I'm actually going to move the header outside of the container because I just want to style the container with containing these two elements, the store card list and the map component. So if I start with the left side, so if I name this component search results container, and then in the other side we are going to have the map container like so, and we close this one off as well. And surrounding the container and the header, I'm just going to add a React fragment which gives both of them the same parent. This is essentially a shorthand method of typing React.fragment like so. If I now import these containers from the styles and the map container as well, and I also need to create the folder for that. So within my pages, I'm going similar to the index folder. I'm just going to create a new folder and call that location. And within the location, I'm going to create a styles.js file. Import style components again. Style components. We're going to export the main container equal to a div. We also have a map container and a search result container. So if I go back into my location, copy these out and just paste them in here like so. And then if I put in a p tag saying search, and then I also need to add the file. So it is the current directory in my location folder /styles. So now if I save all, now what I need to build out is this section here on the left. First of all, I'm going to build this reusable store card component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a new component folder within here and call that store card like so. Give it an index file and a styles file. Now what I want to do as well, I want to, in my search results container, I want to go to the components folder and get access to the store card. So we want to render that out onto the page like so. And if I click auto import, or I could just manually import it. So if I click on header and command D, which selects the other header, and then just type in store card. Now I save. I'm getting this error because I need to build out the store card. So if I give it a functional component and name it store card like so, and in this give it a H1 saying StoreCard. OK, and save and refresh my page. So the store card is rendering, but it is rendering behind my header. So it is behind, as you can see here. So what I will do is go back into my location.js and add the header within the container and save and refresh. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to style the container. So if I go into my locations and I want to give my container a padding top of 100 pixels and save, I now have my store card visible. So what I will do now is build out the store card component. So if I go into my index.js for store card, replace the divs with a container like so, add the styled in the styled file. Now that my store card is in place, what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to take the data from my console, from my locations page, and I'm going to map it through, and for each item or for each store in this case, I'm going to print out a store card. So in total we should have 10 store cards. So I will do that in the next video. Okay, so I'm going to mock out a store card now. If we look on the actual Costa website, they have a top row which has the name, a middle row which has the address. We're not going to add the miles on, but we are going to have an open time on there along with rendering out these icons, which is the click and collect and the delivery like so. So if I define the top row first of all, so top row, this is going to be a div within the container that gets closed off. What I'm going to render in this top row is a H3 that will contain the name. So I will pass this prop down to the store card. So the name is the first thing that I will pass down. The second thing, I'm going to put in a p tag that will contain the address. I will also add another p tag inside which has the opening times, which I will render in bold. So if I put the strong tag and opening times with a colon, and then after that add a space and then render out the times. So I will have the name, the address, and the times being passed down. If I go onto my API console, I also get the click and collect and delivery. So if I pass them down also, click and collect and the delivery, this will render on the bottom row, and that will be whether this store does delivery or click and collect. I would leave the latitude and longitude for now. That will be done with the map component. So what I need to do now is go back to my location page. So what I want to do is render out this array here, and I want to map through each object within the array and print out a store card component, and each store card component will pass down the props containing the address, click and collect, delivery, name and times on there. So the way I would do that within my search results container is I would have curly braces to define that this is going to be a JavaScript method being called. So my store result I will get, and then what I'm going to do is dot map through this. Before I do map this, I'm going to add optional chaining in here, which means if the store results are valid and they are there, then we want to map through. So for each result or store in this case, this could be anything. So we're declaring that once we map over store results for each store that we have, I want to return, so I can implicitly return. So if I use the parentheses, which are just normal brackets, that would automatically return something for me. So for each store, I want to return the store card. But in the store card, I want to pass down these props, which I've also defined in here. So if I just copy them across into my locations, in my store card, paste them in like so. I also need to define what the name is going to be. So in this case, it's going to be the store.name. So store.name, like so. Same with the address. So if I just copy this, it would be the address. The times would be store.times. Click and collect, which would equal store.click and collect. And the delivery, which would equal store.delivery, like so. And we need to remove the comma from there. But what I also want is a unique identifier to make sure that for each store that I map, they are unique, and the only unique identifier we have is the ID. So what I'm going to give is an ID as a key. So I'm going to pass down the key, which is equal to store.id, which is the unique identifier in this case. And I also want to pass down the ID as well, which is equal to store.id also, ID, like so. So now if I save, I should have rendered on the page each store card. So what I need to do now is in my store card index, I need to define the top row, which is coming from the styles, like so. So now if I save, I should have all 10 of my stores mapped on the page, like so. Okay, so on the top row, we have a name, the address, the opening times. So now we have all the stores, the addresses, the names, and the opening times on our page. In the next video, we're going to style the store cards and add extra functionality so that we have the delivery and click and collect rendered if the prop contains the delivery as true and the click and collect as true. Okay, so I have imported a few icons that I have got from my public images folders that I need to render on this page. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to check whether the store offers delivery and click and collect services. So I am going to create a function just before I return that renders out for each store whether they have the delivery and click and collect as true. So just below on the bottom, I'm going to create a div. I will add curly braces to let next.js know that this is going to be JavaScript, and I am going to create a function named render features, like so. So if I create this function, so function is const render features, which is a function like so. I'm going to add a few checks to see whether they offer delivery or click and collect, or if they offer nothing. So first check is going to be if they have both click and collect and delivery. So if click and collect and delivery is true, like so, I want to return a div named features row, which I will define in my style component. So if I copy this, add that in here, like so, go into my styles and paste that in, and then go back into my store card component. I'm just going to copy what I have. So within this block, I'm going to paste in a div. I want to import the image tag from next. That source will be the delivery icon, which I have imported. It will have a width of 30 pixels and a height of 30 pixels and object fit of contain. So that will be the image. And then after that, we will have the delivery as text along with the same with the click and collect. So if the features row has the click and collect, it will render them both. So if I save and check, we now have certain stores with delivery and click and collect. Now what we need to do is the same for delivery only and collection only. So if I just copy what I have again and paste underneath. So if there is delivery, we want to return the features row and we want to have a div just saying the same delivery icon along with the delivery, again using the next image tag, and then the same with the click and collect also. If neither are there, then we just want to return null. So nothing will get rendered out. So now we have them all rendered out. If the prop has click and collect or delivery of true, it will render them both. If, for example, click and collect is true on this one and there is no delivery, it will only render the click and collect icon. So for this Sainsbury's local, we only have the click and collect icon here. So now it's just a case of styling. So what I'm going to do is, if I go into my styles file on the StoreCard, I am going to copy my code for my container. So if I paste that in, for each container, I'm going to add a padding of 18 pixels at the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the left and right. We're going to add a border bottom of this lighty grayish color and have a max width of 600 pixels. I want to access my theme file, so I get my props and return the props.theme.white like so. And then when I hover over, I want this as a background color. So this will be this lightish grayish color. My H3 tags, so these headings, what I'm going to give them is a font family of Gotham. I'm going to remove the font family because I have declared that in my global CSS. The font size of 1.4 rem, a line height of 26 px. I'm going to change this color now to the theme color. So that will be the primary color for the heading. We're going to give it some margin here, along with some white space and a text overflow of ellipsis. This basically adds 3 dots to the end if the max width is exceeded. So if the 600 pixels is exceeded and the text is too long, then it cuts out characters and the font weight are bold. Same with the p tags, adding the text overflow ellipsis, and we're going to hide any overflows. So if I save all, so now as you can see, each component, if I hover over it, has the hover effect and it has some sort of form of styling. Now what I need to do is style the top row, but before I do that, I need to add the logos before the store names. So the way to do that is, if the store delivers, then they have this logo, and click and collects also. And if they don't offer the delivery services or the click and collect services, then the store will have this sort of orangey reddish color. Okay, so what I need to do is, back in my index, I need to add further to my top row. So I'm going to render the icons beforehand, and I also am going to render this arrow chevron on the right of every single top row. So if I go into my index, in my top row, I'm going to create a div like so. And in this div is going to have 3 containers. First container is the icon container like so. And then within the icon container, I want to render a next image component with the source equal to. So if delivery is true or click and collect is true, then we want to render the services icon, which I have imported. Otherwise, we want to render the non-services icon like so. We're going to give this a width equal to 20 pixels and a height equal to 35 pixels. And I am also going to give it an object fit of contain. And then we close off the image tag like so. I then need to copy the icon container and add it into my styled imports, and then also export const this icon container, which is equal to a style.div like so. So now that I have that and I save, slight little error here. We need to remove this extra curly brace, and we also need to remove this extra one. So now save, and it should render the icon. So now it's just a case of styling along with adding an extra chevron container. So I'll just quickly copy what I have. It's basically the same as the icon container, and we imported the source for the right chevron over here. So now if I go into my styles, I need to style this. So I also need to add in the image container, icon container, and the chevron container like so. And I also need to import that in my index file. Okay, so now I have everything I need on the page. It's just a case of styling them out, and I will use the flexbox to do so. So if I go into my styles, first thing I want to do is the top row. So if I look at this one here, I want to display of flex, align item centrally, and save. I also want to justify the content as space between for the outer div, so that will be these two are wrapped in a div and this is separate. So in the top row, I have a div. What I need to do is push this chevron container outside of this div and now save. So that pushes the arrow all the way across. Now I need to style the div inside this top row. So I basically need to copy this, render it inside the div like so, and justify content as flex start. So everything is at the start. So for the icon container, I just want to give it a margin right, so it's 5 pixels, just so that the title is spaced away from the icon itself. The chevron container is at the flex end. Now, the final thing needed to do is style the features row. So display, flex, line items center, and save. Now, what we need to do is the div inside the features row. So if I just copy this across into the div below and save. So all I want to do within this div is get the p tag and give this a margin left of 10 pixels, just so the click and collect and the icon are separated, and save. So now that should all be complete. We have successfully mapped through the store API and we have styled it out just so it looks similar to the one on the Costa website. In the next video, we're going to start getting the map component ready and map that out, and we will add this to the locations page, and that's all coming next. Okay, so now that we have our StoreCard component rendering on our location page, we now want to have a search bar at the top. So the way we want our search bar to work is we want the user to type in the field and the outcome would be what the store name is. So in this case, if I typed in Camden, then it would only filter any titles that contains Camden inside. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a div just above the search results container. So within my container, but above the search results container, I'm just going to create a div named search bar container. And inside the search bar container, we're going to have a input field. And we are also going to have a button that has this icon, which we will get from Material UI. So if I start by getting an input field, type of text because we want the user to type in. We also want a placeholder within our search input, and that will be type to search. So now that we have that, we want to have a button or an icon that we are going to import. So if I just copy across the icon that I have, so in this case, you would go to Material UI and search for the icon that you would require. But in this case, I already have it. So the search icon, I need to input it in as if it was a component. I also need to declare the search bar container. So if I add that in as an import from my styles, go into my styles and create a div. And now if I save and go back to my local host, I should now have a very basic input and a icon there. So what we're going to do, we're going to style this now so it looks like the one on the Costa website. What I am going to do is first of all give the container a background color of white. So I'm going to access my theme file once again, taking out the props.theme.white like so. I am also going to display flex on this because I have two children within parent. So display flex. I want to also align the items centrally. We want to justify the content as space between because we want to have space in between. I'm going to give it a height of 50 pixels and it's also going to have a margin of 10 pixels all around. Now if I save, so we have the input and the icon separated. I am also going to give it a border and the border radius, which I will paste in. So the border radius would have 30 pixels around if I save. Now we can see the same shape as what is on the Costa website, like so. I'm also going to give it a max width of the container, so max width, and that is going to be 200 pixels, just to see how that would look. Maybe I give it 500 as the very maximum. Now what we want to do is we want to style the input within the div, so input, and this is going to have a flex of 1, which means it should take up all the space available, an outline of none, which will remove this dark line just outside. We would give it also a border of none. So if I now save, I now have no outline or no border around the input. I am also going to give it a padding of 10 pixels all around. And what I also want to add is a padding left, because we can see a little bit of whiteness just on the outside there. So if I give it an extra bit of padding on the left of 15 pixels, if I increase that to 25 or 45, and if I also give it a padding on the search bar container on the left of 15 pixels to push the left side in a little bit, and in the input I'm going to give a font size of 1 rem to the text in the input. So now that portion is complete. If I type, that looks okay. So now we're going to work on the search icon. So if I copy the selector, I already have the styles for this. So if I just paste that in, so what we're doing is we're selecting the icon from Material UI. We're going to give it a color of white, which I will use for my prop. We're going to have a background color of the primary color. So if I copy that again and use that from my props, and we're going to use the primary color. We have a border radius around, so what that would do is it would only work on the top right and the bottom right as a border. A height of 100%, so it's relative within this its container. A width of 20%, so it's going to take up 20% of the container, and some padding of 8px. So if I now save, so now it has the similar effect. And we also have a hover background color over here, which I will add to my theme file. So if I just copy this across, go into my theme.js and add a button hover style like so. And now I have access to the button hover through my prop. So if I just copy this and replace the color with the props.theme.button hover. And just one final touch is on my search container, I'm going to add a cursor pointer, and if I now save, now I should have the color, and I also have the little cursor just pointing on. So now the style is complete, and in the next video we're going to be working on the functionality on how we are going to filter each individual store card based on what we type in the search bar. Okay, so now that we have our search bar styled out and looking good, what we need to do is we need to connect that with the store card so that when we type into the inputs, that it will filter out the relevant stores nearby. What I am going to do is use the useState hook. What it does is it preserves a value within the functional component. So what I want is to define that. So if I name it search, and set search. So search will be the initial value, and then set search is when I change something. I want to update the search value. So if I set search, essentially the new value will take over the old value. So if I give it a use state of an empty string for now, I also need to import use state from React. Now with the input, I want to give it a value which is equal to the search. So at the minute, the value is empty, and the value is empty also here. If I was to give it a value of hello, now the updated value or the value saved in state would now be hello. So initially, what we want to keep it as is empty. So if I save back, so now what we have done is we have connected a value within state, and we have added that to the input container. What I want to do is when I type, nothing happens. So what we would need to do is update the state when we type in the input field. So the way to do that is we need to add an onChange event, which would take an event, and what that would do is it would return an event. So if I just put in E for now and I console log what E returns, if I now save and go into my console, what you're going to see is if I type in hello, I am now getting events back on my console. So if I now go into the console, as you can see, the type is change and the target is the input. So if I go into the target, I now have this drop down here. And what I want to update in my target is this value here. At the minute, it is nothing. So if I console log e dot target dot value and save, what will happen is at the bottom of my console, if I now type in hello, what it does is it logs out each character that I type into the input field. So now what I want to do essentially is I want to update the search value. So instead of me console logging, I want to now, each time I type in, I want to copy the set search and call that so that when we change the target value of the event, the search value will now change. So now if I save, and now I should be able to type in hello like so. And to test that this works, if I console log the search value and save, the value is now hello. If I was to delete characters, it does update like so. And if I typed hello again, it updates. So now that the input search field is updating its value, what we need to do is we need to connect it to the store card. So the way to connect the value to the store card is when we access our store results and when we map, we also want to filter, which is the same functionality as a map, but instead we're going to filter. So if I use a $sign for this one, which returns, so for each item, if I change this to item, and then if the item dot name dot includes, so what we're saying essentially is if the item dot name, which is equivalent to the store dot name in this example here, includes the value of the search input, then we want to filter out the name. So in this case, if it includes the search value, then that will first off filter out the names and then map out the rest of the store cards. So if I save now and then test this out, so cam done. As you can see, it's updating in the console, but there is a slight issue here. So if I type in the capital C, like so, then the name would return. So to fix this is quite simple. What we just need to do is before the includes check, we just want to use the JavaScript method to lowercase, like so, and save. So now if I type Camden in lowercase, it would filter. If I typed in local, it now filters. So now we have a fully functioning left side of our location page. So this side here. So on the next video, we're going to start using the right side and building out the map container. Okay, so now it's time to build the map component. So we already have set up a map container within our location page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to render out a map component that we're going to build. So if I import a map component like so, and I also am going to pass in my store results down as a prop because we will be needing them in the map component to get access to the latitude and longitude. So now that I have built the map component, if I go into my components folder and create a new folder named map, add a new file named index.js, and if I do rfce and tab, and this will be named map, and then I'm just going to add a h1 saying this is a map. And if I go back into my location JS, I need to import this map component now and save. So at the bottom I have this is a map rendering. So the package we're going to use to add the map on is going to be called React Leaflet. It has a few dependencies that we need to install. So if we copy, open up a new terminal and paste in the first dependency like so, and we also need to install React Leaflet itself. So now that's installed, we need to import the necessary components. So if I copy this and go into my map component, and at the top, I'm going to paste in the imports that I need. So if I click on the setup on next, it now asks me to follow all the steps on the installation page and add the following code to your app to check it displays correctly. So I am going to copy this and paste it here like so. If I now save, we now have a map showing on the page. So what I want to do is I want to edit this now. So if I go on to my location page like so, and I have the map component within the map container. So if I now go into the styles and go into my map container, I am going to give it a width and a height. So if I give it a width of 300 pixels for now and a height of 300 pixels also, and save and refresh. So what we now have is an error which says window is not defined. So we'll explain the reason why and how this has happened in the next video. Okay, so in the last video, we got the following error, which is window is not defined. For some external libraries, such as React Leaflet, they do require the window. So what we need to do is we need to block the server-side rendering. So we need to dynamically import the individual components within React Leaflet. To do this, if we go on to the Next.js docs in advanced features and dynamic import, if we scroll down, to with no server-side rendering. The explanation here is you may not always want to include a module on server-side. For example, when the module includes a library that only works in the browser. So what we need to do is we need to import dynamic from next dynamic like so and paste that in. And we also want to import this just below like so. What is happening here is we essentially want to return this and also turn off server-side rendering. So what I need to do is replace the name of my constant to the map container. So in this case, I want to dynamically import the map container from React Leaflet. So if I copy React Leaflet like so and replace this with React Leaflet, what we also need to do is we need to return a promise of what the actual import is going to be from React Leaflet. So if we scroll up to here, we now have a component that returns a promise. So if we just copy the last part on the dot then and paste that in, so we want to essentially import React Leaflet, which then returns a promise. And in that promise, we want to return the map container. So mod.map container like so. And then the second argument is the server-side rendering, which is false. So now we've successfully dynamically imported the map container. We just need to copy this 3 times. And what we will do is return the tile layer for the second import, and the promise will be the tile layer. We want to return the marker also, and just finally the pop-up. Now we need to remove the old import now and save. And if we refresh the page, we should now be getting the map container loading onto the page, and we are now dynamically importing using the advanced features from Next.js. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to style this map out, and we're going to then plot the latitude and longitude of our stores on there. So now that we have the map functionality working correctly on the page, we just need to style it. So first off, if I go into the documentation on the installation, it does give a quick start guide. So if I click on this and I scroll down for React Leaflet, I do need to import a CSS file into the head section of my document. So if I just copy this, and if I go into my map component and add a head tag, which you can use via Next.js. So what has happened is I've imported the head tag from next head, and inside here I'm just going to import the style sheet. So now if I save, I now have the style sheet imported, and if I go back onto my project, what I need to now do is style out the container for my map. So if I name this container, and then I need to create a styles file, so styles.js, and as we do styles, import styles from styles components like so, export const container. So what we are doing essentially here is we're explicitly exporting the constant. So then when we import it now, so there are two ways of importing. There's the implicit and the explicit way. So if I import with these curly braces like so, that is an explicit import. So container from the styles file. So if I was importing a component like the map component in my location file, as you can see, this is a implicit import and the styles are explicit. Okay, so now that I have set up my container, what I am going to do is I'm going to give it a width and a height. So this is the width will be the width of the map component. So I am going to give it 100% width and also 100% height. This is because it is wrapped around the map container in the location file, like so. And the map container has its own styling, which we will update later. So now width and height. Now if I save, what I am also going to do is I am going to give my map container a class name, which is equal to map container, like so. So now I am going to go back into my styles, and within the container, I am going to select the map container, and I am going to give the same width and height over here. If I now hit save, I now have my map showing up on the screen. So now if I go back into my map component, I now have imported the styles. I have the map rendering on the page. So what I am going to do in the next video is I am going to get my store results from the props, and we are going to render out the individual locations on the map over here, and also add some store information inside this icon just here when we click on there also. So now that I have my map showing up on the screen, I just want to map the locations all across. So I should have quite a few locations marked out in the region of London. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my store results from the props. I'm going to console log to see if I'm getting any data coming through. Save. If I inspect in my console, so now I am getting an array of 10 results on there. So what I am going to do in my tile layer, I'm going to get curly braces for a JSX element. So this is where I'm going to map through. So if I copy my store results in here, and I'm going to optional chain dot map. So for each store I get, I want to return implicitly. So, and inside here, I want to push this up. So for each marker, I'm going to render the position. The first position is here. So this is going to be store dot latitude, which I have here. And I am also going to get the store dot longitude, store dot longitude, like so. So now if I save, I should have all of my maps all here. So I do have all of them rendering on the screen, so that's good. What I also want to do is in the pop-up, I'm going to edit this. So I am going to have it H1 in here. with the store.name. I'm going to have a p tag just underneath with the store.address, and I'm going to have another p tag with opening times with the store.times in there. I'm also going to make the opening times in bold with some strong tags. Now, if I save and I zoom in and I click on a certain one, I now get the name, the address, and the opening times rendered out in the exact location that is needed. What I also want to do is I want to update the tile layer. So if I copy over my tile layer, so there are a few different skins you could get, but I have got this map designed from the guys at DB. There is a repo on GitHub that I looked at, and they have quite a few different designs. I thought that this one was the most similar that I could find to the Costa map. So now we have the map looking good. We have the contributions on here, so React Leaflet and CortoDB. I also want to zoom in a little more. So if I increase the zoom to 13 on save, so now I would have my locations more visible. And I also want to center this. So what I'm going to do is install geolib npm. So what this does is it calculates the distance for you. So if I install this in my terminal, so essentially it has a hook which is called get center here, which takes in the latitude and longitude. So what I need to do is I need to transform the data that I'm getting passed down in my store results into a new constant. So I'm going to call this one coordinates, which is equal to store results map. So for each store that I get, I want to return a new object, which is the latitude that is equal to store.latitude, and the longitude, which is equal to store.longitude, like so. So now that I have my coordinates, I'm just going to console log to see if I have created a new object, coordinates, like so. And if I now save and go into my console, now I have an array of 10 objects which contain the latitude and the longitude. So if I now remove my console log and go back into geolib, so what I want to do is I want to explicitly import get center, which is from geolib, like so. So now I'm going to define the center. So const center is equal to get center, which I'm going to pass my coordinates in. Now if I console log the center and save, I'm now getting a longitude and a latitude that is calculating my center. So all I need to do now is get the center position. So center position is equal to an array of center position dot latitude and center position dot longitude, like so. So now that I have my center position, I'm going to just copy this, and where it says center, instead of having this array here of the latitude and longitude, I'm just going to paste in the center position like so. And now if I save, I've got an error. So what I need to do is if I go onto my center position, I actually need to get the center from the get center of the coordinates and not the center position, and remove them. And now if I save, I should have it perfectly aligned in the center like so. So the only thing remaining now in the next video is if I go onto the Costa website, is this hover button over here. So we will build that in the next video, and then it will just be a case of styling the location page out, and then that should be complete. Before we add the navigator button onto the map, I first want to clean up the location page. So if I first go to the StoreCard component and the search bar, what I want to do is I want to align them together. So if I go to my location page, I need to now add a wrapper onto the search bar container and the search results container. So I'm just going to call this left side container, like so. And within this left side container, I'm now going to insert the search results container and the search bar container. If I now create a div for this left side container, so add this into my imports and now go to my styles. If I export const the left side container, which is equal to styles.div, and now if I save, what I want to do is I want to now display this container as flex, and that will push it into a row like so. And now to put it back into a column, I just need to give it a flex direction of column. And I also want to give this a max width of 600 pixels, 100 pixels like so, just so it's contained within the left side. Now, if I go into the outer container of the map component and now the left side container, what I want to do is I want to style this so that they are both aligned horizontally. So if I go into my container and give this a display of flex and save, that now pushes both components into a row. We now do have a scrollable element where it's displaying all of the 10 store locations. So what we want to do is style the left side again. Now that I have given a display flex to the container, what I now want to do is give the flex of 0.4 to the left side container. What this will do is it will give it a 40% width on the left side. And now save. And now if I give this flex of 0.6 to the map container, I now want to give the container a width and a height. So the width will be the full width of the screen. So in this case, 100 view width. And the height will be 100 viewport height, like so. And if I now save, that should contain everything within there. I now need to remove the width and height from my map container. So the map will now stretch out and take up the entire height of its parent. If I now go down to the left side container, I am now going to reduce the max width and take that out and save. I'm now going to give the outer container an overflow of hidden, just so it's contained within the width and the height, and save. So now there isn't any overflow on here, like so. And for the left side container, I want to now give an overflow of scroll. So in this case, I want to change the y-axis only. So if I now save, as you can see this overflow scroll here at the bottom as well. So if I save, the y-axis should now have a scroll. We now want to also remove the scroll bar on the left side. So if I just copy the code I have, so what we are essentially doing is we're going to replace the WebKit scroll bar with display none. Now if I now save, we now have the layout of the location page set up. If I now expand, we have our map taking up 60% of the width of the location page, and now we have the location store cards taking up 40% of the width. Now to add the navigator button, we are first going to go to the map component, and at the bottom, after I've done my mapping, I want to add a container named location mark or navigator container, which will have an image. So I'm going to pull in the next image tag, and this image is going to have a source called location marker icon or navigator icon, and I am going to give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. And if I close the image tag off, we're now going to import the navigator icon at the top. So import navigator icon from the public images folder. So upper directory, and again into my public slash images slash, and this icon is called the location marker.svg, so that one there. I also need to create this div, so if I copy the navigator container and add that to my styles, so export const, which is going to be a div like so. And now if I save all, at the minute we can't see the icon. What we need to do is style it. So if I just pull over my styles from the build I've done earlier and just paste them in. So what I essentially am going to do is when we hover over the image, I'm going to give it a cursor pointer. We're going to have a position of fixed on there, so it's fixed on the bottom right of the screen. We now need to position that, so if we put it as 60 pixels at the bottom and 40 pixels at the right, we're going to have a padding within inside the image, a border radius of 50 pixels to make it look like a circle. The background color is going to be the primary color, so we're going to pull in the props. So if I get my props, and we're going to return the props.theme.primary like so. I'm going to give it a z index of 5 just so it's hovering above all the other elements on the page. Now if I also copy the props here, and the image color is going to be white, so if I just rename the primary now to white, and if I save, so to add the functionality to the navigator button, if we go on the Mozilla Docs, we have the following method which is being called in the window. So what we're going to do is simply just copy this in our map component. So if we just copy the example across and paste it in just before the return, I'm first of all going to replace the var with constants, so keep it up to date with the ES6 syntax. So now we have defined the 3 arguments that we're going to call. I'm going to create a function named handle location, so const handle location like so, and this will return the following. So I'll copy this across within here. I'm just going to get the window just beforehand. Now that I've declared my function, I'm simply going to copy this, go to my navigator container and add a on click that is simply going to call the function when we click handle location. Now just to point out as well, because we are using Next.js, we do have some cases where we can use the window object, such as this case, because the button will only be visible when the window has loaded. Therefore, there's no server-side code needed for this. So when we click, the window is then available. So now if I do save, now if I click on the navigator button like so, and now you can see localhost 3000 wants to know your location, so you can either click allow or block. I'm going to just allow it. So now if I expand and see the page entirely, we can now see that the location page is now complete. We have a scroll on the left side. We have a map that you can zoom into on the scroll. If we click on a pop-up, it gives the store information, which is customizable. So if we go into our map component within pop-up, we can now edit the styles. We could add more information from the API. We could do much more with this. We also have the navigator icon in the bottom right corner, which hovers, and we also have the search filter functionality. So in this case, if I wanted to search for all stores titles named Sainsbury's, I now have that feature. We also have the click and collect functionality on here, like so. And we also have filtered out whether this, if the store does not do delivery, then show the orange icon, and if they do delivery, show the maroon Costa icon. So in the next video, we're now going to move on to the menu page. Okay, so now that we have our location page complete, we're now going to move on to the menu page. So if we go into the Costa menu website, we can see here that they have this a similar banner to the one that we created on the home page. So what I'm going to do is create the new folder structure for the menu page, as we are going to have pages that lead off from the menu page. So we're going to add another route, which would be slash the ID of the drink. So instead of having a pop-up modal open, what we're going to have is an extra path. So this drink, for example, would be /1 or /2 for another drink, and so on. So first off, if I go into my pages directory, I'm now going to create a new folder and name that menu, like so. And the menu page that was previously created, what I'm going to do is move that into my menu folder, like so. In this file now, I'm going to rename this to index.js, so that when we go to /menu, the index page will now show. I'm now going to import the header, go into my components from here and save. So now we have the menu page. I also want to make a little change onto my header. So in my header, I'm going to give this a top of 0, so it sticks to the top of the page always. And in my header also, I'm going to pass the linear prop, which is what we did previously on the home page, so that the header component would be transparent, and then that way we could render the banner behind. So now if I save, you can now see my menu page is just behind. So what I need to do with this is replace this with a banner container. So this one will be called menu banner container. And in here, we will have the next image tag, which has the source named menu hero banner. We're going to have the same width and height as the home page. So the width will be 2000 and the height will equal 1000. And we are also going to have an object fit, which is equal to cover. And now if we close off the image tag component, we also need to create a styles file within the menu folder in my pages. So styled.js, like so. If I import styled from styled components, now in order to copy the same styling as the homepage banner, what I am now going to do is I'm going to import the styling for the homepage banner. So import, and if I go into my homepage styles, so index and then styles, I have the main banner container here. So if I just copy this, go back into my menu, and now what I'm doing is importing the main banner container from, if I go into the index folder and in the styles, so now I have access to the main banner container styles from the index styles. So if I go into my menu index, and now I have named this menu banner container, so export const menu banner container, which is equal to styled, and then in brackets, what I'm going to do is insert main banner container, like so. And if I want to further enhance the styles, I could add them in here. But what I want to do is essentially make a copy of this on to this folder path, so in the menu folder path. So now my styling for the main menu banner container would be the same as the home page. So if I now go into my index, I have now copied the styling from the home page, imported the image. I now need to import that from next and at the top. If I now import the menu banner container from the menu styles, like so, and if I now save, and if I import the menu hero banner from my public folder, and this menu hero banner is going to be named all menu hero image. So in my public folder /images/ at the top all menu hero image, like so. Now if I save, I now have the linear background on the header, and I also have the banner placed right behind it at the top. What I also need to do now is add the content text. So if I again go into my styles and I'm going to name this export const menu hero content, and it is going to be equal to styles. And if I go back into my index styles, I'm going to copy the hero content style. So if I also copy that across, so it's going to be the exact same. Menu hero content is going to be equal to styles dot hero content. And if I go on to the content, it has a H1 and a H3. So what I'm going to do is copy this across. So the H1 is named menu. I also need to import the menu hero content from my styles. It is going to have a H1 of menu, and in this case I'm going to put a p tag, and I'm just going to copy this from the website, paste that in there, and then if I just remove these for now, we could get the HTML alternative for this, but I'm just going to leave them as they are. And if I import the menu hero content from my styles also, I should now save all. And if I go back into my menu, I now have the H1 and the P tag here. What I want to do in my hero content, I want to make the H1 a little larger. So if I give the H1 in the hero content a font size of 3 rem. So what I need to do is remove the padding. So I'm going to inspect the element. If I click on this element inspector and just go on the menu, I can now see there is a little bit of margin at the bottom and the top. So I'm just going to change the margin on the H1 slightly. So margin of the bottom, I will only change. So I'm going to change this to 10 pixels like so. And if I save, it pushes the p tag text up a little bit. So now that we have the menu banner complete, we are now going to move on to setting up the API for the drinks. So we are going to collect all the drinks data, create our own API, and that's going to be done in the next video. Okay, so before we go ahead and build the drinks page, what I want to talk about is some of the features that we're going to be using with the latest that Next.js has to offer. The first feature is going to be get static paths. So the documentation that Next.js defines it as is if a page has dynamic routes and uses get static props, it needs to define a list of paths that it statically generates. Now, what we essentially want to do is define the paths based on the ID of each drink that we have. So in this case, we have up to, I'd say, 28 IDs. So if I was to get the path of 27, the page that gets rendered will only return this object here as one of the paths. We want to fetch all of the paths within our API. So we will have 28 in total. So what Next.js is going to do is statically build the page paths. So you should use get static paths if you're statically pre-rendering pages that use dynamic routes and the data comes from an external source. So in our case, it's coming from our API. So when do get static paths get run? It runs at build time on the server. However, if you're using incremental static regeneration, it can also run on demand in the background. So we will go into further detail when we are actually building the page. And also, just to point out, we can only use get static paths when we use get static props, which is the next page in the documentation. So what the get static props does is it fetches the data similar to how we used get server-side props in previous videos, for example, on the locations page. So you should use get static props if the data required to render the page is available at build time. So essentially what we are doing is we're going to get the data on the server side. We're going to pre-build the paths. So in our case, it's going to be the IDs. So for example, ID 27 or 13, we're going to have that data readily available so that when we access /menu/13, when we have clicked through a product on here, what will happen is it will build the page in real time then. At the moment, we are not fetching that data, so we would receive a 404 error. So if we use both the features that we've talked about, getting static paths, so getting all of the IDs or all of the drinks pre-rendering on the server, and if we use get static props to fetch the data from the server and build it. So essentially what happens is when the user accesses the page the first time, Next.js will then render that page out from the server side, deliver it to the client on the browser. And once, say for example, we have entered 13 and the page is then built, it will then cache it into its next cache, like so. Within here, it will have pages being rendered. It will then cache it onto the pages directory in here so that the second person that accesses the page will then see the cached version. After that, because the data is stale, what we will do later is add revalidation on there so that we refetch the data every 30 or 60 seconds, however long we define it. And then that way, our website is faster, it's more efficient, it's making less API requests, and essentially it's just managing itself. Now that we have the menu page set up, we now need to create an API for all of the drinks that are on offer, along with the details for each individual drink. So I'm going to create a new folder in the API folder, which is going to be called drinks. And within drinks, I'm going to name a file called index.js. And what we do is very similar to the store. We get a handler function. So what we could do is copy this, but I have already done so. So all you do is the very same as the store.js, where we export a function named handler. So I have already done that. And if I copy what I have and paste it in, what we now have is a new function which has a list of drinks on there. They have a name for the drink, a URL which is an image URL similar to this one here. We have an ID per drink, the drink type, so if it's a coffee or all, this will be used to filter out the drinks like this drop down select here. We have the category name, which is coffee. We have the description, which we will use when we create our pages like so. So this description here. And just finally, we have a large image URL, which is this large image here. So now that we have created this, if we save, and if I go into localhost /API and /drinks, which is what we've named it, we now have an API which contains all the drinks data that we need. So all we need to do now is create a dynamic API route. So at the moment, if I was to go on /1 for the ID and press enter, we would reach a 404 page. So what we want essentially to happen is when we go on /1, we get all the data returned back for the drink that contains the ID of 1. So in this case, that would be the Energizer Caramel Latte. So what I'm going to do now is if I go into the Next.js doc, now we have already created the handler function. We now need to go into the dynamic API route. So in here, what we can see is the following piece of code. So we want the route where if we go onto the /API /drinks instead of post, and then we also want the ID of the drink. So in this case, the ID would be 1. So it would be /1. So all we need to do now is create a new folder within the API folder. So in this drinks folder, I'm going to create a new file, and this is going to have the array like brackets, and I'm going to name this ID, and I close the brackets .js. So as you can see just below, we can model this in two ways, the first way or the second way. So we are going to be doing the second way here. as we have already defined the structure within the folder. So to catch all the routes, I want to name my slug as id.js, which we have done. We then need to import all of the drinks within the index.js file. So what I have done here at the bottom is I have done a module export of the handler. So within the id.js file now, we want to create a copy of all the drinks and put it in a constant at the top. So if I copy the entire array of drinks like so, copy that across, and then if we create a constant in the id.js file of Costa drinks, so these are all of my drinks, which is equal to this array. So if we paste that in here, what we now want to do is do a comparison. When we get the request.query parameter in there, there should be an ID. So now that I have all my drinks within the id.js file, I also want to create a new handler function. So if I copy the code I have here, I'm going to call this function handler again, and we get a request and response object within the handler. So within the request object, we get the query, and within the query, we can destructure the ID. So the ID could be anything after the drink, so it catches the next route. So slash drink slash test, it could be slash 1 2 3. So in this case, we are going to use the IDs of the drinks as the catch route of the ID. So what we are doing now is we're doing a comparison within here, which gets all of the drinks declared above. We're going to filter. So for each drink, we're going to get the drink ID, which is equal to the ID from the request query. So the ID within this URL. So that would be 1 2 3. We're going to get the first index of that, and then what we're going to return as the to status is the matching drink. So now if I save, and if I go into the /3, for example, I should now get the energized vanilla latte with vitamin B12 zinc. So if I go and enter, it has now filtered out with the request ID in the query as 3, which matches up to the ID within this object. If I do another test and we check for the ID of 12 as a drink and press enter, and now we get the ID of 12, which is the caramel hot chocolate. If I was to type in test, for example, we now get a blank page because there's no ID matching to the test string. So now that we have the API set up, we can now carry on and continue building out the menu page. So now that we have our API, all we need to do is map the drinks onto the page. So if we go into our menu page, we want to again get server-side props. So if we go on the location.js and we go down to the get server-side props function, if we just copy this across to the menu page like so and just paste that in, there are a few changes we need. So first off, we don't need the context object on this page. We want to change the store results to drinks results, and the fetch is coming from the drinks API. So if we copy that and change the endpoint for the fetch, and then copy the drinks results, and in our props we want to return the drinks results, we can now destructure in our menu function the drinks results like so. Now all we want to do is console log the drinks results, and if I hit save and inspect my console and refresh the page, we now have an array of 28 different objects, which are all the drinks that we need. So all I want to do now is render out a drinks list component. So if I create a new component called drinks list, and I also want to pass down the drink results as a prop. So drink results, which is equal to drink results like so. If we now go into our components folder and create a new folder named drinks results, and in there create a new file index.js or FCE to create a functional component for React, and we're going to rename this drinks results with a capital D. We are also going to destructure our drinks results like so. And just to test out that we are getting the drink results through, I'm going to console log again with a comment saying this is the drinks result component, and I'm going to give a h1 of drink. So now if I save, what I also need to do is import the drinks list into my menu page. So now that I have that set, I just need to import it. So if I copy the header, it's underneath, and just replace the header with drinks list. Now if I save and refresh, so under the hero content, I now want to render a new component, and I'm going to call it drinks results. And in drinks result, I'm going to pass the prop of drinks results, which is equal to drinks results. And in my component folder, I'm going to create a new folder called drinks results, which is where I will create my new drinks result component. So create a new file named index.js RFCE for React functional component, and this will be named drinks result. And we also want to destructure the props being passed down, and this is going to have a h1 of drinks results like so. And I also want to console log my drinks results from here and give this a capital D also. And if I just add a comment saying this is the drinks result component. Now if I save all, I now need to import the drinks result component from my menu page. So as you can see just below in my component, I'm now getting my drinks results through with the comment. This is the drinks results component. So if I go back to my drinks results component, I'm going to start building a drinks container. So the container will be an individual drink like so. We are going to map over them and return the image and the name of the drink. So what I will do is create a container for this named drinks container. And in this drinks container, I'm going to get my drinks results, and I'm going to add an optional check in there, optional chaining, which only says if I have any data coming through, then I want to map. And for each drink I get, I want to return, so implicitly return a drinks component, so an individual drink like so, which takes in the key of drink.id. It is going to take the ID of drink.id. It is going to take an image also, which is equal to drink.url, a name, which is equal to drink.name, a drink type, a category name, and the description. So I'm just going to pass them as I've already mapped through. And then if I close off this drinks component, so this individual drinks component we will create later on, which is the equivalent to when we click through and we render this page. That's what the drinks component would be. So now if I go into my styles, I want to create a div for this drinks container. So new file style.js, and if I import styled from styled components, I am going to export const the drinks container, which is equal to styled.div, and I'm also going to import that in my index file from /styled. And now if I save, what I now need to do is create the individual drink component. So now that I've passed down all the props, if I go into my components folder and create a new folder named drinks, and if I create the index and the styles, import styled from styled components. Now this is going to have a container, so export const container equal to styled.div. And now if I go into the drinks index file and I create the function component named drinks and pass in my props, so I'm going to destructure the props, so I'm getting the following. So if I paste them in, so what I now need is the ID, the image, the drink name, the drink type, the category name, and the description. And if I remove the key and delete the ID as we don't need that. And what I need to also do is import the drinks component from drinks like so. Now, if I save all, I now need to map out each individual drink, what it's going to contain. So now I am going to copy what I have. So if I return a container, so we will have the outer container, which is a div, and then a drinks container, which takes in the image source. So the next image tag, which we need to import, the source, which is equal to the image being passed down, the width and the height, and we're going to contain the image within its container, and we are also going to pass down the name. So all I need to do is go into my import and import the container and the drink container from styles, which we need to create from styles. So we have the container, and now we just need the drink container. Now if I save, I now get the following error, which is the host name is not configured. So in my next config file, I now need to update this with the costa.co.uk hostname. So all I do is paste it in like so. So now what we would need to do is restart the server as we have made changes into our config file. So now if I refresh the page, I should now get all of the drinks rendering out. Okay, and I should be getting the names, but they are in white. So I will quickly change the text in the drinks results. So the color is going to be from the props, returning the props.theme.black, which we don't have. So we will just add that in now. If I go down to my theme.js and underneath add black, which has the hex code of 000. Now if I save, I now have the drink image and the drink name like so. So in the next video, we're now going to style out the drinks similar to how they are on the Costa website. Then after that, we're going to have this drop down that will filter out all of the drinks. Okay, so now that we have mapped all our drinks on the screen, we're now going to style them. First off, I'm going to style the individual drinks component. So what I need is I want to give the container a display of flex. So if I go into my styles, give this a display of flex, and then in my drink container, which has the image and the name, I'm also going to give a display of flex, which puts it into a row. I'm now going to give it a flex direction of column, and then I'm going to align the items, align item center. I'm also going to give this each individual drink a width of 155 pixels. So now we just need to style the p tags within. So first off, I'm going to give this a font size of 1.5 rem, font weight of bold, and save. And now we need to get the color as a primary color. So selector, accessing the props and returning the theme. So props.theme.primary and save. I'm just going to make the font size a little smaller to 1 rem or 1.2. That's fine. And then I am now going to add a margin bottom of 9 pixels and save. So now we have the drinks component styled out. We now need to go into the drink results component. So first off, the outer div I'm going to change to the container, and I'm going to copy this and add it into my styles, and at the top export container to styles.div, and in my drinks container I am now going to give a display of flex and save. So now they all should go in a line all the way across. I want to align the items centrally, and I also want to justify content centrally. I'm also going to give it a max width so that it doesn't overflow and go to the next line. So that will be 650 pixels. Now if I save, I also need to add a flex flow of wrap. So now what that does is it wraps everything within the 650 max width. And just finally, I'm going to give it a margin of auto, just so it's positioned centrally on the page, like so. So now we have all the drinks looking similar to the Costa website. I am also going to give this a gap of 10 pixels, so it'll space out the drinks a little bit more. So now they're spaced out a little bit. I've just noticed as well that the menu text on the banner has dropped down. So if I go into my menu page, so menu, and the drinks result needs to be put below the menu banner container. And now if I save, that goes back and we have our title also. So title is there. And if I go back into my drinks results container, I now need to have a container wrapping the H1. So this is going to be called the category container. Category container. So, and I'm going to move everything in this up into the category container. And I'm going to delete this console log, add this category container in the styles. So export const container equals style dot div. So what I'm going to do in this category container is I'm going to display flex or flex, and if I save, and all I need to do now is give it a flex direction of column. I want to now give this a margin of auto as well. Margin of auto and save. I'm going to align items at the start, so flex start. And I'm going to also give this a max width, the same of 650 pixels. So now everything should be in line. The title is in line with the text. For the title, I'm going to style that out also with a font size of 3 rem. The color is going to be the primary color. I'm going to have a padding of top and bottom of 20 pixels and 0 on the left and right. And now if I save, we now have the title similar to the title on the Costa website. So now that is the styling complete. All I want to do now is also add a cursor pointer on the container. So cursor of pointer, save. So now I should have a cursor on top of the drinks. And in the next video, I'm going to add the import dropdown, which filters out the coffees or the drinks and will only return the ones in the relevant category. Okay, so in the last video, we styled the drink results container. I do want to make one little adjustment in my category container, which is for all the p tags, I just want to text align center. As you can see, they are positioned towards the left underneath the images. If I just add that. So now what we're going to do is build this drop down select bar. So if I create a new div, so export const select container, which is equal to styled, and we're just going to copy the drinks container styling like so, and then we will add to that. So if I now import this into my index file, and just above the category container, I am now going to add the select container. So what this is going to have is a select drop down. So if I add a HTML select drop down in here, and I'm just going to copy across the options. So we're going to have 5 options. One is the value of all, the other is coffee. We're going to have a hot chocolate, a frostino, and a tea. So if we look into our API, we have the category name as coffee. We have a few hot chocolate ones. So if we just go through them all, we also have the frostino and then the teas. So what we're going to essentially do is filter out based on whatever the user selects. We're going to show the relevant drinks for that. So now if I save all and go back into my menu, we now have a drop down that has all the categories of the drinks that are included inside. So in terms of styling, what we can do is if we inspect the element on the Costa website and we highlight the select category, we now have access to the styling. So I'm just going to copy this like so. And in my styles, in my container, I'm now going to have the select. And inside the select, we're just going to paste the styles. And if I now save, we now have the exact same styling as what is on the Costa website. I also want to have a heading which says showing. So if I go back onto my index and above the select container, just render out a H5, call that showing like so and save. And now have the showing. So if I now push this into the select container, so it inherits the styling. And now I'm going to style the H5. So if we scroll further down and the heading, the H5, this is going to have the following styles, which I will copy across and explain, which is a display of inline block, a margin around. The color is going to be the primary color. So if we select that from the props, primary, we're going to have a width of 100 pixels and a font size of 1.2 rem. And we're going to have some padding of 5 pixels. Now, if I save, so now that is showing. Now we have styled the heading and the drop down container. I'm just going to add a bit of padding just above so it separates from the main banner. So on the container, I'm going to put a margin top of 20 pixels like so. So there is a bit of space. So now that the styling is done, if we go back into our index file, and what we are going to do is insert some state similar to how we did with the search bar. So this one is going to be called filter, and set filter is going to be our action, which is equal to the use state of all. Now if insert the use state hook from React, okay, and save. What I want to filter on is the drink type. So at the moment, all of the drink types include all. Now, if they include tea or if they include coffee, we then want to filter the drinks out to the relevant drink type. So in my drink results, before I map, I now want to filter. So when we filter, I want to get the item, and for each item, I want to return if item dot drink type dot includes the filter. Then we want to map all across. So at the minute, the filter is set to all, therefore all of the drinks will be mapped. And I just need to add the full stop on filter. Now if I save, so at the minute, we have all of the drinks filtering out to the state of all, which is in our API. So all of the drink types include the string of all. So in our select dropdown, we need to add a onChange event so that we know the change has happened. So in my select, if I add onChange, which is equal to a function, an anonymous function, which returns the e.target.value, and I want to get the event object also, and I want to console log the value that I get back from this. So if I now save and inspect my console and scroll all the way to the top, if I now select hot chocolate, I now get returned hot chocolate. If I select tea, I now get tea. So all we need to do now, instead of console logging this out, we just need to update this to set filter so that the value within the filter updates. So this text would update to whatever is being returned. So if I now save and close my console, I should now see all the drinks at the start. And then if I filter to hot chocolate, nothing has happened. So nothing is getting filtered out. So if we inspect why that is, so if I go into my API and check the drink type, we can see that the Frostino drink type is in lowercase, whereas the values in the options are in uppercase. So all we need to do is on the value, just chain on a 2 lowercase, like so. Now if I save and refresh the page, if I now filter out, hot chocolate gets returned, the tea gets returned, coffees get returned, and finally all drinks return everything here. One last thing that I want to do is for my drinks results heading, I now want to change this to whatever is being returned for the filter and save. So now at the moment it's all drinks. If I change that, it changes to coffee, it changes to Frostino and so on. And I also want to make the first character uppercase. So now to capitalize the first letter, I already have a function in place for that. So I copy this and paste this in. We have a function called capitalize words that takes in a string, and what it essentially does is returns the first character of the word and turns it to uppercase. So all we need to do is in our heading, we just need to wrap this around the filter within the JSS brackets like so. And now that is capitalized. The Frostino is capitalized, hot chocolate, and so on. Okay, so that's the menu page complete. In the next video, we're going to build out the product page. So when we click on this, we want to see the information for the drink. We want to see the drink details. We're going to use incremental static regeneration, where we only build the paths that we need. So that is all to come in the next video. Okay, so in this video, we're just going to talk a little bit about incremental static regeneration. So essentially what it is it allows you to create or update static pages after you've built your site. So essentially it enables you to use static generation on a per page basis without needing to rebuild the entire site. So you can basically retain the benefits of having a static site while scaling to millions of pages. What we are going to do is we're going to use get static paths and get static props. So with get static props, we're essentially going to make a request to the API to get all of the data. In our case, we will make a request to the drinks API. So we'll make a request to slash drinks slash the ID, which in turn would deliver the individual ID of the drinks. Once we have done that and got the static props, we will then get the static paths. We'll essentially calculate how many IDs there are from our API. So in total, there will be 28 different drinks that we will get the paths for. So essentially, we're fetching the data and we're fetching the amount of data, and then we will be delivering that to the page. Once we have got static paths, this function gets called at build time on the server side. It may be called again on a serverless function if the path has not been generated. So what that means is at the moment we have 28 different coffees. If we, for example, added another 10, what would happen is when the user accesses the other 10, so if I get extra coffees populated after Earl Grey tea and I clicked on them, it would pre-build that page and then add it to the Next.js cache. So it won't need to refetch that page again because it's already in the cache. The get static paths we want to pre-render based on post will pre-render only these paths at build time. Fallback blocking will render server render pages on demand and if the path doesn't exist. So going up to get static props, and when we add the revalidate feature, what that means is Next.js will attempt to regenerate the page when either when a request comes in or at the most every 10 seconds. Normally, when we deploy the app, that page is static, therefore, that page is stale. And the only time that page gets updated is when we redeploy again. The revalidate feature will attempt to regenerate the page in the time frame that we specify. So that could be 10 seconds, 100 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it may be. So what we are essentially going to be doing is getting the static props, fetching the data for all of our drinks, and then we also fetching the amount of drinks that we have, serving it up together, and then delivering it out onto the drinks page. So to summarize, when the request is made to the page that was pre-rendered at build time, it will initially show the cached page, any requests to that page after the initial request, and before 30 seconds are also cached instantaneously. So this is regarding the revalidate feature. After the 10-second window, the next request will show the cached stale page. After the 10 seconds though, Next.js then triggers the regeneration of the page in the background. Once a page has successfully been generated, it will then replace the old cache with the new cache, and then this cycle gets repeated as many times until we either cancel the website or stop the server, or unless we change the revalidate time frame. When a request is made to a path that hasn't been generated, Next.js will server render the page on the first request. Future requests will serve the static file from the cache, so meaning it won't update after that. So in the next video, we're going to begin the process of getting our static paths and our static props. We're going to create the product page also. Okay, so in my menu folder on the pages, I'm going to create a new component or page in there, which is going to chain on from slash menu. So this one is going to be called ID, but in array brackets like so. So this is essentially after we hit the menu page, forward slash anything after. So in this case, I'm going to name this ID. I'm now going to create the functional component, and instead of calling it brackets ID, I'm just going to call this page drinks information. Now, what we want to do is we want to get the API data from the API slash drinks forward slash whatever the product we click on. So for example, if we click on this product, we want to get this product's ID, which will be added onto here. So that product ID may be 12 or it may be 13 or so on. So at this stage, we are going to go back onto our Next.js documentation. First off, I'm going to get static path. So I'm going to render out all the paths that contain the ID within. So in the drinks information page, I'm going to create an async function. This is because we are fetching data from the API. So export async function, and this is going to be get static paths like so. So we're getting all the paths of the product. In here, I'm going to get a response first of all. So const res is equal to await fetch, and in this fetch, we're going to get the drinks API. So the following here, so get static paths fetch API forward slash drinks, and then the drink, we're going to set a new constant called const drink data, where we pass the data into JSON. So await res dot JSON like so. So all I want to do now is console dot log drink data like so. Now if I save, and now if I go into menu slash 12, so we now have data coming through in the console log. So we now need to return the data. So if I return the path which we need to define, and I'm going to add a fallback of blocking. So if we go into Next.js documentation, they do have a fallback in here of blocking. So this will serve rendered pages on demand if the path doesn't exist. So that's what we'll have. So to define the path, I'm going to create const path, which is equal to drink data dot map. So for each drink, I want to return an object, and in this object, I'm going to have access to something called params. So I'm going to define the params, and the params are going to have a key and a value. So the key will be called ID within an object. So ID, which is drink dot ID. So we are mapping through the drink data. For each drink, we're going to set an ID of drink ID. I'm just going to check. I think this might be a number. So what we want to essentially do is return it as a string. So if I do drink.id.toString like so, or we could wrap it in a string like so. And then what happens is we now are returning the path. I'm just going to call this paths with an S, so it's plural. So now we have all of the paths. The second part, what we need to do is get the static props now. So if we just copy, export async function once again, and this one is going to be get static props. And within the get static props, we're going to define the ID. So const ID is equal to the context dot params dot ID. I'm also going to get the context from here, and I'm going to console log what is in the context text, and comment that out and save. If we open the terminal and scroll all the way to the bottom, and if we refresh the page, we are now getting back the params, as you can see, an ID of 12. So this one is 12. If we change that to an ID of 22 and went on that page, we now get an ID of 22, which is a string also. The params are defined in get static paths. So as you can see here, we get our drink data from the API, we convert it to JSON, we get the paths, we map through the paths, we create a context object of params, which is being returned. So params.id will be a stringified version of drink.id. So now we have access to the context here. We now want to define the ID. So the ID is equal to the context.params.id like so. So now what we are going to do is create a new URL structure where the ID gets added on to the slash menu, and then that would pre-build the API for a certain drink. For example, slash 13 would be the drink for white hot chocolate. So I'm going to create a constant named drink results. So we await fetch data. So I'm going to put template strings in here, so backticks, because this is going to be including the ID, which we have defined. So if we copy this structure here and paste that inside, the final part where the ID should be would contain selector, and inside would be the ID like so. And now we will fetch the data from slash menu slash ID. So now we have the drinks results fetching from this API. All we need to do now is pass this now to JSON. So we add a dot then block, which gets the response, and then that response gets converted to JSON like so. And now we have finally the drink result. So we are now going to return the props within, which is going to be the drink results. And like we discussed earlier, we are also going to add the revalidate feature in as well. So this will attempt to regenerate the page either when a request comes in or every 10 seconds. So after my props here, I'm going to put a comma and paste in the revalidate. In our case, I'm going to add a revalidate of every 100 seconds. So now we are returning the drinks results. So in my drinks information component, we now get the drinks result. And if we console log the drinks result, and if I just say hello in this div and save, now we are going on menu slash 22 and we are getting hello. So it's essentially pre-built the page. If we go up to our folder structure and go into next and go into cache and server and into pages, we should have a menu folder here which has all the cached pages for the menu, and in this we have the ID. So now we have the hello. If we go into our console, we should get the same data as what we have in this API call. So we should have a coffee frostino with the same description, same large image, and so on. So if I go into my console, we now have an object with the frostino coffee and the ID of 22. So we are now getting the data through for the relevant ID. If I now search for the fifth ID, we will now get an updated page with the new information. So at this moment, it is a cappuccino we are looking at, and that is a coffee. And to verify this, if we go into API/drinks/number 5, that is now a cappuccino in a coffee category. So we are getting the data through. So what we are going to do in the next video is build this page here. And once that is rendered and working correctly, we are then going to go back onto our drinks and link them together. And then we should have the menu section complete. Okay, so now that I have my dynamic data coming through, I'm just going to build the page for this. So we're going to have two sections. One section of the page is the image, and the other section is going to have the drinks information. So if we go on to our code, first thing I want to do is create a container for this. So if I create a container and then import this container from the styles, so in the same directory we have styles, and I'm just going to open this also and export const the container, which is equal to style.div. And if we go back, I'm going to have two containers within this container. One is going to be named the image container, and the other is going to be the text container. These are both going to be divs also. And if we go into the styles and repeat the same as the container. So now that we have the details, I'm now going to create within the text container a h1 and the p tag, which I will paste in, and I already have the data already mapped out. So I'm going to get the drink results.name. So if I go into here, I'm accessing the name called Coffee Frostino and the description, which is here. All the drinks have the same description underneath of this also, so I've just put that in. The image I'm now going to access, so I'm going to use the next image tag again to get the WebP version. So the source of this is going to be the large image URL. So if I copy this and get the drinks result dot large image URL like so, the width of this is equal to 1000 pixels, and so will the height, equal to 1000. And if we close off the image tag and import this also from next image, now if I save, I should see the image and the text. So yeah, we've got that. So now all I need to do is style this. So going into our styles.js, the container is going to have a display of flex as they are side by side. Align items centrally and justify content center also. And if I save, I have them split evenly. For the image container, I'm now going to give this a flex of 0.5, and this is going to be the same for the text container. And now they are evenly split across the page. I'm going to give the image container a height of 100 viewport height, so 100 VH. And it's going to have a background color of the same color as the background of the image. And if I save, so now what I need to do is push this image to the middle here, like this one. So if I give it a display of flex, align items center, and also justify content center, that should push this down to the middle. Now that is done, we need to style the text container. So I'm going to give the text a padding, top and bottom padding of 50 pixels and a left and right padding of 40 pixels, just so it's spaced out and not touching the edges. Now if I save, and I also want to give the background color of white, just like so. I'm going to style the H1 inside the text container and give that a font size of 3 rem. This in here, 3 rem, and the color is going to be this primary color of the Costa website. So I'm just going to copy my props, and it's going to be named primary. Okay, and then finally the p tag to style. So that's the heading complete. So with the p tag, I'm just going to give this a font size of 1 rem and a margin of top and bottom of 20 pixels. So if I now save, so now it's evenly spaced out. Just finally in my container, I'm just going to add a media query. If it goes to a tablet sized device, then we want to change the flex direction to column. So now that is in a column, and if I was to stretch it, it is now in a row. So just the final thing to add now is the routing. So if I go back onto the menu page, I now want to click through to the relevant drink of my choice. So if I go into the menu page index, so now I'm going to in my drink results, and where I have my individual drinks being mapped out. So now I am going into my drinks component, and within the drinks component, I'm going to wrap the entire container. So each drink I'm going to wrap with a link tag, and it's going to be linked with a href equal to. So I'm using next link for this. And in the href, I'm going to add template literals in here, /menu/ the ID that I am getting passed down from the parent. So selector, curly braces, ID. And now if I close this, and I wrap the other one around the end of the container, we now have the link wrapped around. I now need to import this from next link, and if I now save, we should have the routing all complete. So if I was to filter to a hot chocolate and I want to go onto the chai latte product information page, I would now click. It's pre-building the page, and now that the page is built, it's rendered out the relevant image, the relevant name and description for me. So now if I click back, we now could try the mocha, for example. And now same again, we have the mocha printed. And if I went on /300, for example, as we don't have the relevant path for this, it would get an error. So what we need to do for this is if we go into the menu page on the index, and where we are fetching the data in the ID, and instead of fallback blocking, if I put fallback false and save, and now I refresh, we now get a 404 page. If I went onto the Costa website and typed in some random string and pressed enter, we will now get a custom 404 page. So in the next video, we're going to build out the custom 404 page. Okay, so what we're going to do is create the custom 404 page similar to the one that they have on the Costa website. So it's quite simple to do. In our pages folder, if we create a new folder called 404, we will now create a new file in there named index.js. In the index file, I'm just going to copy the code I have and explain. So essentially, it's another function again that I've named not found. We have a container. Inside the container, we have an image container that imports the not found image. So in this case, it's going to be from the public folder. So /public/images/ it should be 404.svg like so. We get the styles from the current styles, which I will now create a new file for. So styles.js like so. And we also want to get the header from the components. So if we fetch the header from the components folder in components/header, so now we have everything here. What all we need to do is paste in these styles, which is essentially a display of grid and place items of center, like so. And I will also add a margin top to the image container of 30 pixels. Now, if I save everything and refresh, we now have a custom 404 page, similar to the one on the Costa website. Okay, so now that we have our app complete, we are now going to upload our code to GitHub. So what we are going to do is create a new repository, and this will be called Costa Coffee YouTube. I'm just going to make it private for now, and then I'm going to create this repository. So now I have got my repository. It's giving me some code that I could add into my existing command line. So if I just copy each line by line, if I just open a new terminal like so, and if I paste and enter, so what essentially has happened is it's letting me connect to this repository here, and then the second command, and then the final command, git push origin main, is where we push all of our code to the repository that we are seeing on the screen. So now if we refresh the page, we now have pushed the commit from 3 days ago. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to do a git status to check the status. So it's saying that I now need to add all the files in red. So if I add them all, so git add space and full stop and enter. So now it's added every file. So now if I check the git status, they should be green. Okay, so I now need to commit a message. So git commit -m for a message, and in speech marks, I'm going to put completed Costa clone YouTube and close the speech marks and press enter. So you should see this number change. The final thing we need to do is we need to push this to the repository. So if I check git status, it tells me that your branch is ahead of origin main by 1 commit. So all I need to do now is git push, and this will update on here. So git push like so, and press enter. So now all my files are published on GitHub. Okay, so here is the completed website. We now have a header component that takes in a prop to determine whether it's going to have a linear background or not. We have the home banner that hides behind the header. We have a reusable split banner component that we can pass props down, and it changes the text and the images and so on. If we go into our menu, we have a menu page that renders out all the drinks that we have on offer that is being called from the API on the server side. We also have a drop down select that filters out the relevant drinks that we need. So if we wanted hot chocolate, we could select hot chocolate and Frostino, for example. If we then click through to the individual drinks, so if I click through to the Belgian chocolate and cream Frostino, it would now fetch the data from the API and build out a new page with the ID of the product in the URL as a param. If we now go back and do the same for the cappuccino, it conditionally builds out the page relevant to the product's ID. That is all complete there. And finally, we have got the locations page, which has a list of all of the store cards that we have, and we are calling from the API. We can also filter out the store cards. So if I search for Sainsbury's, it filters it out. We also have the latitude and longitude of the stores and plotted it on a real-time map. And this is done by using React Leaflet. If we refresh the page, as you can see, the central location. So what happens is it gets the center point of all of the stores, and it calculates that and it renders the map on the page in the center position. Also, we have the navigator button where if we click, we can give permission for the browser to have access to our location, like so. And this map zooms out and zooms in. And the map tile design is from React Leaflet and also from Carto, who have attributions with this design. There are some improvements that I could make on this app. For example, I haven't done any mobile designs. So for example, if we scrolled in like so, we could potentially have a new header component get rendered. We could also change the display for this from a flex direction of row into a column where the image is displayed on top, and the same for this. If I also go on to the menu, again, we could have extra padding on the sides and on the location page. Again, we could have the map displayed above with the store cards displayed below. So these are some improvements that we could make. And this series was mainly looking at the new features of Next 12 and also style component and working out ways on how we could build the website. There are improvements that we could make, such as designing the site for mobile. But other than that, it was just to have fun and see how far we could build the website. I really hope you liked the YouTube series, and if you did, if you can please give my videos a like and also subscribe, that would be really helpful so I could delve into other websites and showcase how I would build them also.